Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're taking a look at Gelid's Black Furore, a very cost-effective, tiny tower cooler for your mini systems. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so I've probably over-egged it a little bit. This isn't necessarily for mini systems, but certainly it will come in very handy. This is a very diminutive cooler. That is a big word, look it up if you're not sure what it means. Now this cooler has actually got a height maximum of around about 121 millimeters, so that means it's going to fit into an absolute plethora of cases. So if you are building in one of those slightly more compact systems, or maybe you're building a media center of some sort and you just don't have the room, then this could tick the boxes for you. Also, it does have a somewhat unique feature in its price class of, at the moment, is in around about the €13 price mark, around about $17, so I guess that's going to equate to somewhere in the region of about £10 or £11. But this has actually a really nice look to it. It's got some really nice electroplated black fins on there, it's got a black fan, and also it's extremely quiet. So again, this should tick a lot of boxes for those media center builds. So let's go through, take a look at the packaging, we'll go through the specifications, and I'm going to do a test fitting on a moderate system, because, well, you'll find out why shortly when I go through the specifications, and we'll see how it performs, and then I'll come back with my final verdict. Although realistically, for under kind of £15 here in the UK, there isn't actually a great deal to choose from. If we do go up the price points a little bit more, then obviously that opens up a whole plethora of options. But yeah, for under £15, there isn't a lot that touches this, to be honest with you. So looking at the packaging, first of all, as you can see on the front here, actually nice packaging. Again, this is from Gelid. They have sent this to us free of charge for review purposes. So they haven't asked us to say anything, just said check it out, see what you think of it. And we do have a perfect build this is going into, so yeah, it was extremely good timing. So anyway, it's the Black Furore Ultimate CPU Cooler with Smart PWM fan. Ultimate CPU Cooler is probably over-egging things a little bit, but well, you know what these companies are like. On the side of the box, it goes into some of the specifications and some of the features. So Smart PWM fan. So this is using a 92mm fan, which is their kind of Smart 9 fan, which is very quiet, or Quiet 9 fan. You've got two heat pipes in this particular one, and also you've got this really nice fin grid array. The TDP for this is 65 watts. So for a lot of people, you're probably going to be turning off straight away. But for those of you that are going to stick with it, and you have got a CPU which is under 65 watts, so this is going to be things like the Ryzen 3 1200, which we will be using it on. Also, you've got things like the Ryzen 3 2200G, 3000G, some of those lower end parts, and even actually some of the newer parts higher up the range. The 3600, that certainly you could use it with that, although possibly I wouldn't recommend it. Although it is going to perform considerably better than the stock cooler and is likely to be extremely quiet. On this side of the box, it goes into what we actually get in the box. So yeah, no surprises there. We get a fan, we get heatsink, we get some mounting clips. So that's suitable for Intel and AMD processors. So you can actually buy this. And if you are considering changing your platform from Intel to AMD or vice versa, then this is going to have you covered in both options. Sadly, it doesn't support the new Intel LGA 1700, but it will fit the new AM5 processors, as we've been told that they are going to be pretty much exactly the same fit as AM4. So no issues there. And on the box, it does show the application list of suggested processors. Moving on to the side of the box, goes through some of the specifications, so I'll give you a close-up of that so you can take a look in more detail. But essentially you've got a hydrodynamic bearing, you've got a 92mm fan, 4-pin PWM, you've got the height, width and dimensions there, also the sound and also the RPM levels, all that kind of good stuff. Also the weight, which is 268 grams, that's the heatsink and the fan. So let's take a look inside and see what we actually get. So first of all, we get a accessories pack, which doesn't appear to be too elaborate, so we'll take a quick look into this. So you get the Intel mounting ring, which these I dislike immensely, I'll say that straight away. They're kind of good in the way that they work so that coolers can fit various things, but these with the plastic push pins, so you get a kind of plastic insert which goes into here, and then you get a plastic push pin which you push through the insert, which then splays out the legs and keeps it retained. These things are pretty awful. There are 3 markings actually on the legs which give you the size of the cooler, so it does list on there in particularly small writing, so I did actually have to zoom in with the camera to get it, and it was upside down, so I do apologise for that. But basically it says 775, 115X and the 1366. So the 115X is going to be essentially the same as the LGA 1200, so you can use that. So it's essentially the middle one if you're using it on modern Intel processors. But yeah, not the nicest design, but it will get the job done. Also included is a small installation pamphlet, which doesn't go into a huge amount of detail because, to be honest with you, it's actually pretty straightforward and simple to do. But yeah, all the information is there should you need it. We will be doing an AMD installation later on in the video so you can see how that goes, but yeah, it is extremely easy. The nice thing to see included is some thermal paste, and actually a reasonable amount of it there. So this is Gelid's GC Pro, and it also comes with a plastic spatula for spreading the paste, which is recommended for that particular style of paste. So finally we get to take a look at the cooler itself, and as you can see this thing is pretty cute. So starting off at the front, obviously we have got the Gelid Smart 9 PWM fan on there, which is a 7-blade model, RPMs between 900 and 2000 RPMs. Whether or not it's going to be loud at the 2000 RPM, I'm not entirely sure. We will check that out and give you some noise references later so you can see what it's going to be like. Potentially it could ramp up to that. This is a 65 watt TDP cooler, so yeah, you might see it ramping up again. We'll check all that out a little bit later. It is held on by spring clips, which actually are particularly solid ones, so difficult to actually get off. You will need to use a flat-headed screwdriver just to kind of lever those clips off. At least I did, because I don't have any fingernails. The thin stack itself is actually really nicely finished. I think that is one of the highlights of this. It does look particularly nice, considering it is a budget cooler. If you were to compare this with some of the budget offerings from Snowman, from AliExpress, etc., I think this actually does look very professional, and if you put this onto a relatively budget system, I don't think anyone would look at the cooler and say that's a cheap cooler, because it doesn't look cheap, it looks actually quite professional. The fin stack itself isn't particularly wide, so again that is going to be helpful if you've got issues with either RAM clearance or VRM clearance, but again this is a compact cooler so that shouldn't be an issue. On the top, again, nicely finished there, you can see the heat pipe protrusion, so you've got two 6mm pipes there which are in a U shape, and they are attached at the bottom. This actually quite nice little heat plate there. You can see the pipes, so you've got direct touch contact for the heat pipes into the processor itself, and a reasonably smallish heatsink bottom part there, so that isn't going to take a great deal of heat, although ideally you're going to want most of your heat transferring through the heat pipes and wicking into the fin stack. Clip wise, you've got the push panels, so these are for use with the AMD stock cooler mounting, so AM2, AM3, AM4, those plastic brackets that come pre-installed on the motherboard, so these push down. And what is nice actually on this particular version is exactly the same on both sides. Quite often you find with these, then you get one which kind of hooks on one side, then you have to use pressure on the other, so you sometimes get a slightly uneven mounting pressure, or it kind of squishes the paste out one side or the other. So hopefully that shouldn't do that on this, but also it could gain issues where if you've got your VRM relatively close to where this is, you might struggle actually getting your fingers in to push it in. Again, we'll find that out a little bit later on. Connectivity, we've got a really nice braided cable, which is again relatively unusual to see at this kind of price point. All of the wires are fully blacked out, so no weird ketchup and mustard type look, and it's even heat shrunk right up to the very end there, leading to the 4-pin PWM connector. So I think that's pretty much it for taking a look at the cooler itself. Again, pretty cool, looks nice. I'm hoping it performs particularly well. So let's get out our test bed and we'll take it for a drive. So here we have it. This is our AMD platform, so micro ATX board. This is the Ryzen 3 1200, which some of you may have seen us do a couple of shorts on and some other content. This was from CEX, and the pins came, well, yeah, the pins weren't great, let's put it that way. So we're going to be using the GC Pro from Gelid. So all we're going to need is a little bit on the middle there, just a small lump. And it's actually quite runny, this stuff, so we're going to use the spreader, which is included, and just going to spread that out a little bit. That's going to be absolutely fine. So next thing to do is to get the cooler ready. So as you can see, this is a tiny little cooler. So depending on your system, obviously you can, if you want to, you can take the fan off and do it either way you want to. It is completely symmetrical. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm actually going to remove the clips off the side here. And in order to do that, just a little bit of pressure. And that comes off nice and easily, exposing the heatsink, as you can see there. So what we want to do is to line up the clips this side and this side with that lug and that lug, which is your standard AMD mountings. And shall I just loop one over the back anyway? So a little bit of pressure on there, get it kind of lined up. And then what you can do is just a little bit of thumb pressure on the side, and that is it, locked into position. So that was pretty painless. And as you can see, it's actually kind of self-centralized itself pretty well in there. And actually, yeah, I don't think I could have done that much better if I'd have tried. That was worked out particularly well. So the next thing to do is to obviously reattach the fan. So what we're going to end up doing is lining up the fan. Now this is going to be great because we've got plenty of clearance for RAM, as you can see where the RAM sticks are, so that's going to be absolutely fine. So these clips are a bit of a pain, the fact they actually just fall off. So we're going to line that up and just lock that into position. We are going to have to actually hold the fan in place, otherwise it's going to have a tendency, I think, to... Well, no, it's alright. No, you can do it pretty much one-handed, so that is actually pretty decent. So loop that through, and through that hook there, and a little bit of gentle pressure, and it locks into place. And that essentially is it. Now you can, if you want to, you can put the fan higher or lower, depending on what clearance you've got. Probably it might be a little bit better to go a bit higher up, so, but anyway. We'll see how that goes. Next thing to do is to plug in the PWM connector, which just goes onto the end of the motherboard there. And that is it. And in fact, there's actually quite a lot of cable there, so we'll probably end up having to push that away. Obviously you can cable manage it and tuck it under here if you wanted to. Yeah, absolutely fine. And yeah, looks pretty decent. It's quite a nice look. Make sure the fan blades spin okay, and let's fire it up and do some benchmarks. Okay, so we finished doing some testing, and I've got to be honest with you, this thing actually surprised me. It is exceptionally quiet. Now, it does seem that mostly when it gets up to the 2000 RPM, you do notice there is an audible difference. But in kind of normal use case scenarios, anywhere between 900 and 1500 RPM, it's basically silent. You don't even notice it's on. And in fact, the test rig I had set up, the power supply was actually the loudest of the things which we had set up, which, yeah, it is very, very quiet. So if you are planning to use this in some sort of media center system, maybe a little micro ATX box somewhere in a bedroom, this is going to be great. Although obviously do bear in mind the TDPs. And speaking of which, we did test it with a Ryzen 3 1200, which, yes, I can tell some of you there are probably saying, why would you test it on that? Well, there's a good reason. We have got a build coming up on it, as I probably alluded to earlier in the video. And actually, we managed to overclock the bejesus out of it. I was surprised actually how far we managed to overclock. So let's go through some of the benchmark results. And first of all, these are results using Precision Boost overclocking, just a standard setup, fresh motherboard, just PBO, nothing else, nothing fancy, just XMP on the RAM, which is XMP at 2933 on our particular sticks. And starting off, we actually got some pretty decent temperatures. We're looking around about 32 degrees with a kind of ambient setup with the fans at 100%. But weirdly, on idle, with it set to PWM at its lowest pretty much speed, at around about 900 RPM, 800 RPM, that sort of thing, it was still only about 33 degrees. So only about 1 degree difference between it being full load or basically silent in those idle statistics. So yeah, not too bad at all. The temperatures did fluctuate a little bit. If we were using it in the PWM mode, we were looking somewhere between 33 and 37, where there's a few little dips and spikes here and there. Whereas with a 100% fan, we were looking at pretty much locked in at 32 to 33 degrees. So yeah, it was definitely doing its job there. Although that is idle results, so not really that telling. Where it gets a little bit more interesting is with the system running Cinebench, and we've run Cinebench a couple of times with PWM and also at 100% fans. Bizarrely, the Cinebench results are actually identical. I did 2 passes, one at 100% fan and one with the PWM range, where it was around about 1500 RPM at the very most. Bizarrely, we got exactly the same result. I actually did run it again a 3rd time just to check, and it got the same again, which is extremely rare. Now, extremely rare. I don't think I've ever had that before. So yeah, these were replicatable results. And we did score about 2526. So 2526. Those aren't massive numbers when it comes to Cinebench, obviously, but it does show that the system is doing what it should do. The real difference here was between the noise profile. Now, in PWM mode, we're looking at around about 47 degrees C, which still isn't a lot. And with that same Cinebench result, and also at 100% load, we got 44 degrees centigrade. So yeah, 3 degrees difference, and the noise profile was very different. Obviously, almost silent in PWM mode, and at 100%, there was a audible noise. When we were testing, we did notice the processor was around about 3450 on all 4 cores, and there's no deviations. Obviously with those kind of thermal limits, then there's not going to be any throttling at all. So I thought what I'll do now is let's try something a little bit interesting. Let's do some raw overclocking and see what we can do with this system. So I installed Ryzen Master, which some of you probably use already, and literally just went into the first creator version and started upping the multiplier. First of all, I went for a pretty big jump from the standard settings. The standard settings actually for this processor was around about 3100, which is its lowest core speed. So I thought, well, we'll start off somewhere a little bit more interesting. So I went for 3750 and dialed that in. No changes to anything else whatsoever. Literally just changed the multiplier and ran Cinebench again. Now this time we got 57 degrees C and we got a slightly higher score of 2750, which is a reasonable improvement. Temperature wise, we've gone up probably about 10 degrees from what we were previously. So that is to be expected. We are in an overclock situation. So being that it did that quite easily and temperatures are still moderately low, I figured, well, let's go do in 100 megahertz jumps and see where we can go from there. So we jumped up to 3850, and with that we got a temperature of 57 degrees C and a score of 2750. So again, another nice little jump. So at 3850 megahertz, we went up to 58 degrees C and got a score of 2822, which, another little jump. Very nice. So that worked well. So we went for 3950 and then we got 59 degrees C maximum and we got a score of 2900. And then I thought, well, let's do another 100. So we went for 4.05 gigahertz. And at that we got 59 degrees C, so same temperatures, and about an extra 100 points on Cinebench, so 2987. We went on a little bit further. I went up to, I thought I'd just jump straight away into 4150, at which point, as soon as I pressed the button, we got a hard crash and I had to reboot the system. So I figured, we've pretty much got to where we want to be on this. We know what the temperatures are like. So even in an overclock situation on that processor, we hit over 4 gigahertz on it, on all 4 cores on this little cooler. So for the sake of about somewhere between 10 and 15 pounds here in the UK, and obviously depending where you are in the world, there will be links in the video description obviously so you can check out local places. I think this is actually a pretty decent little cooler. We got some pretty good results from it. It is very quiet, and one of the nicest things of it is the installation method. The actual springs, they're not overly tense, so you can put a little bit of pressure on there and they do clip on relatively easy. It's nice and easy to install, nice and easy to keep clean, etc. Very small, portable, and it's going to fit into pretty much most PC cases. Even some of the small form factor builds and possibly even some of the OEM builds, some of your Dells and Hewlett Packards and stuff like that. So if you want to find out more about this, don't forget there will be links in the video description below so you can check those out, and even to Gelid's site themselves. Thanks again to Gelid for sending it to us for review purposes, and hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, don't forget to smash the like button. If you've got any comments or questions, you know where to put them in the comments section below. But in the meantime, I've been Mike, this is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.